Here we saw a lot of back and forth as to whether you want Xayah Kaisa in the finals in Athens, but instead Origen say they want the Gragas. Gives as another strong jungler though, and it is one of those level 6 ganking junglers that can have a lot of impact in team fights, like the Sejuani you were talking about.
Can also be flexed, remember, you can move it between both jungle and support. I have even heard some mid laners playing it in the mid lane, not that we have seen it in the LEC as of yet. Meanwhile, as you said, the Kaisa already being covered right now. I do think that it would be an easy and safe lock-in for the side of Splyce. Bit of an LPL special as they love to prioritize this champion, even in the first pick. Now, if they wanted to, they could immediately pair this up with a Rakan, or they could choose to answer with something like the Sylas, which of course is left up and available.
Yeah, Xerxe's played that 3 times this split, has yet to win on it. Humanoid's played it 4, and he has a 50% win rate himself, so we'll see where that goes on the side of Splyce. Origen now looking towards the Tristana, one of the other AD carries that has risen up through the ranks in the last few weeks.
Yeah, definitely a bit more of an EU special. I feel that it's something that EU pros consider to be a good lane matchup into the Kaisa, can scale relatively well into the late game as well, and you also have that added range advantage once you get to those later stage later stages. But I think that as a champion, it can match up very well. And I think that when you pair it up with the Nautilus as well, it gives you a very strong 2 versus 2 down towards the bot side of the map. So Origen already have a very easy lane that they can look to play around if they want to in the early game.
Gragas very good at facilitating some of those ganks now. Splyce will lock in the Braum for Norskeren, one of his comfortable picks. Comfort picks is the word I was looking for. Now we jump into the second ban phase. Syndra taken off the cards. We'll see what Origen decides to prioritize with these bans.
So the Syndra ban is quite interesting. It does suggest that Splyce could be considering the Corki if we assume that the Syndra is a pretty solid matchup into it. Of course, you've got to remember that the Tristana can be flexed between bot and mid, so if Splyce is thinking about running the Corki, then they have to bear that in mind as well. We'll see what else they want to ban away. A lot of top laners available, things like the Gangplank, Vizicsacsi's Poppy, maybe even his Shen could make a return. We did see a bit of that in playoffs. A lot of strong picks are up and available. Very interesting that they would ban away the Cannon. Now, we do know that Alphari is a well-known Cannon player. Cannon top was something he played a huge amount during the regular season, but I feel like AD Cannon did receive a couple of nerfs. AP Cannon, there are many matchups that can do very well into it, especially given that Splyce have counter picks, so I am quite surprised they would invest this ban into a Cannon.
Oh, I'm sure Splyce have done their homework. I agree with you though, even though Alphari is very well known for his cannon, he's actually yet to win on it this split, so a bit surprising that Splyce decided to remove that. The Gangplank taken away, another one of those top laners you were talking about, and now with the Gnar locked in, Splyce have shown their hand on the top side of the map.
Origen could consider going something like a Xerxe here if they wanted to. Xerxe pretty good into the matchup. Gives you another lane that you could look to play around if you wanted to. Strong in a side lane as well. Bit of a hover of the Jax right now. Obviously, we saw a lot of Jax over in the playoffs between Fnatic and G2, mainly as an answer to the Kled. But does act in a similar way in the sense that it scales quite well up against the Gnar. You will have a bit of a rough laning phase because, of course, it is a range versus melee matchup. But once he gets level 6, especially once he gets things like the Sheen, I do feel that Jax can start to trade quite aggressively up against the likes of a Gnar.
Let's see if it plays out the way we expect. At the moment, Origen are hovering over Rakan. I don't expect that to be the pick because the Nautilus already locked in. I think this will be something going towards the mid lane, but it's not. Rakan locked in. Okay, Betty, I'll give you a moment to break this one down because even I'm not sure where these picks are going.
Nautilus mid, perhaps?
I mean, it was a thing for a short time, but really fell out of favor very rapidly.
Yeah, but from what I recall, Nautilus AP mid lane was never really nerfed. It just wasn't a priority anymore. And given that Origen can see that the Sylas locked in, of course there was the option for Splyce to either put the Sylas in the jungle or put it in the mid lane. Origen clearly expected the Sylas to go into mid, and it looks like that the Nautilus is going to be the answer to it. Now, I'll be honest, Medic, I've not really seen the Nautilus versus Sylas matchup.
Learn as we go.
So I'm quite curious as to how this one plays out. But yeah, Origen gonna bring that one back. And to be fair, when you look at the draft that Origen have for themselves, they have scaling in the form of Tristana, they have scaling in the form of Jax. I feel like that their team fighting is quite strong strong and well-rounded, but their early game is not the strongest. And what I do think that the Nautilus does provide is actually a pretty easy segue into the early mid-game, and then you have this late-game insurance with the form of the Tristana and the Xerxe. So I feel like that we could see a lot of aggression towards the mid lane from the side of Origen. Try and put the Sylas behind, try and get this Nautilus to a point where he can just act as a front line for the side of Origen for their team fighting later on.
Now, Nautilus mid is something that has been cropping up a little bit in the LPL. Doinby's been playing it, that known sort of mad scientist that he is. Ender and Yamato.
So we don't have an audience today, ladies and gentlemen watching home. So
we do. We have the most important audience of all. Ender, Weird Champ, and Yamato Canyon. Let's have a look at the Splyce lineup, though. We talked a little bit about how Origen, has scaling with the Xerxe and the Trist and their team fights. Okay, what do you see on the side of Splyce?
Well, I do think that they have scaling options too, but I don't think their scaling is anywhere as strong as Origen's. I think the Gnar is going to fall behind a little bit, and I think that after locking in the Elise, it's actually a lot more important for Splyce to find these early advantages. I'd like to see him try and put the Xerxe behind by playing through the top side of the map, and I think that Splyce do have an advantage in the early.
The first series of the Gauntlet. Both these teams have been to Worlds before, but for Origen it has been 4 years. For Splyce, it's been 3. I'm sure they'll be wanting to weave their way back. Bad news for Splyce fans in the audience, though, is that the team that has been last place in the Gauntlet has never made it to Worlds.
No, but fortunately for Splyce, that team has technically already been removed.
Technically, yes, because we have one less team here than we used to.
Yes,
That's
we do.
True.
So Splyce should be able to avoid that curse, but we'll have to wait and see today. Now, I wanted to remind our viewers at home, given that we haven't seen these two teams in a while, what these teams look like during the regular season. And for Origen, it was a pretty rough regular season. You can see that they finished 7 and 11. They finished in 8th place. They weren't able to qualify for the playoffs, and their early game stats and overall game time did not look super impressive. They weren't very good at finding early game leads. When they were ahead, they often struggled to close out games, and honestly, they never really had any style or identity, which is something that they struggled on throughout the entirety of the split. Whereas Splyce had a pretty clear identity. They were getting early game leads, largely off the back of Xerxe. They slowed down a lot in the mid game because they didn't really know how to effectively snowball their early game leads, and then a lot of their games came down to late game team fighting. You can see that they actually had one of the slowest average game times out of any of our teams during the regular season. So the expectations were coming into this game was that based on regular season performances, we're going to have a long, drawn-out game, with a lot of team fighting and ultimately the end game being decided by how things pan out in the team fights. And based on what we've seen on the draft, I think that we can see very similar expectations for what we saw during the regular season. Early game, playmakers from the side of Xerxe, he's going to be looking to get his lanes ahead. Meanwhile, for OG, they're a little bit more on the scaling side. And again, I think both are going to be looking to team fight later on.
And you can see Origen are trying to track Xerxe as much as they can in the early game. Alphari actually stepping up towards the Krugs here. Nukeduck putting a ward on the Razor Beaks to show where Xerxe is on his path. At the moment, he's down at blue. Zanzarah has done a full bottom side clear and is now looking towards that top side Scuttle Crab.
And for those that may have missed the announcement, unfortunately, Cold is quite unwell right now, and Zanzarah from the European Regional League of Origen is joining the squad. Origen, looks like Xerxe already looking for a bit of an early gank here by using the stacked wave, but I don't think they'll be able to dive this one. Zanzarah going to use this as an opportunity to steal away the enemy camp, but Zanzarah, young player, first time on the LEC stage, definitely a big opportunity for him, and we have some cool fun facts.
We do. He's 23 years old. He was in Russia, not 17. It's a very important distinction for me to make. He actually has played competitively since 2014 and did play on Vega Squadron versus Samsung Galaxy against Crown, Ambition, Ruler. They lost, but he had an okay performance, went 2-1-5 on Rek'Sai.
Yeah, so this is a pretty cool opportunity for him. We'll see how he does filling in the shoes of Cold, who was a pretty big part of Origen's success last split, and we'll see if this young gun can provide something new to the Origen squad.
I do want to talk a little bit about this top lane matchup. You said, we talked about it in Picks and Bans, said with it being ranged into melee, usually the melee falls a little bit behind early on, but here Alphari's having a pretty good laning phase. It's about 10 CS up. Yes, it's early doors, but the further he can get ahead in this lane, the easier it is for him to transition into scaling later on.
So one of the reasons for that is because Xerxe started on the top side of his jungle, which means that he did not have jungle support. So Alphari was able to build up a slow and steady way. Well, Vizicsacsi pushed in early, and then the wave that was bouncing back, he had to disengage from the tower, and he got zoned away from a lot of farm. We did see Zanzarah path up towards the top side and threaten a potential dive. So Vizicsacsi was put into a situation where he doesn't have jungle support, and unfortunately had to play without jungle support, which means that he's now at this early deficit, which is definitely going to hurt him later on, because I do expect the Jax to get to a point where the Gnar won't be able to 1v1 him and deal with him in the side lane.
Let's see if Origen can get towards those scaling points. Xerxe was spotted out on a ward here as he came through to clear out his Grug, so Alphari will know he's now playing on the weak side of the map, as we like to call it. If the jungle is on the opposite side, it means you have to be a little bit more careful around those 2v1s. And Nukeduck in the mid lane on this Nautilus. I haven't really learned much more about how Nautilus Sylas goes. Wow. It looks like it's a pretty even matchup.
Wow, what we can see is that Nukeduck typically has more wave clear than that of Humanoid. It could have just been that Humanoid was allowing the wave to push, but something about Nautilus is he actually just has so many AoE abilities in his kit that he just quite naturally pushes. And often one of his biggest strengths is it's very easy for him to get early lane push, which then allows him to get priority and then work with his jungler to set up invades. But of course, when going up against an Elise, it's not always the best thing, as an all-in happens bot.
Ignite onto Kobbe, he's going to fall. First blood goes down to Origen. They strike first in this Gauntlet series.
So, not a great way to start for the side of Splyce. Kobbe and Norskeren want to be playing more defensively, looking to scale up, and already they're down in the 2 versus 2. Now we see Xerxe hanging around mid.
Yeah, Humanoid's healing up with the Kingslayer here. Xerxe coming in, but Nukeduck should just be able to walk behind the minions. Cleared out. Humanoid now hits 6. The Cocoon doesn't connect. Nukeduck just about able to use the dredge line to safety.
Well played there by Nukeduck. Notice how in that exchange, he was losing no health, whereas Humanoid lost half of it. And if Nukeduck had his ultimate, he may have considered going for a kill there, but because Xerxe's appearance, he was forced to disengage and couldn't look for the commit. We get a look back now at this 2v2 in the bot lane. You can see that the wave is slowly pushing towards Kobbe and Norskeren, so they want to play on the back foot. Not really sure why Norskeren is playing that far forward, because he ends up using all of his abilities, which means that none of them are available to then provide peel for Kobbe, which then gave a massive window for Patrik and Mithy to wall in.
It's a super greedy play because he's trying to protect that ward that he's just put in. He knew it would be cleared away straight away, and he thinks if they can keep the bush control, they can keep an eye on Mithy as he tries to jump in. But incredibly greedy there from Norskeren. You should just give up the ward.
And he ends up getting punished for it. Now this gives Origen priority in the bot lane, but Humanoid does have push in mid, so he should be able to rotate down first, which is forcing Zanzarah to disengage. They'll have to concede the Scuttle Crab for now.
Early on, I think we're seeing kind of what we expected from these two teams. Slower gameplay, Splyce looking for some of those edges but can't quite find it. Xerxe hasn't really been able to have an impact on this Elise as of yet, and as the game develops, you have to expect Origen will be very happy with this state of affairs, especially since Zanzarah early on hasn't really been challenged. Must be a little bit nervous on his debut on the LEC stage, and to have 5-6 levels where you can just farm, you can just keep your laners safe, makes it a lot easier for him early on.
Yeah, and I also don't think that he needs to force anything early. Remember, we talked a lot about how Origen, I think, have a big scaling advantage, which means that as long as you don't throw away any big early game deficits, then you should be fine. And right now, Origen sit with the gold lead. A lot more responsibility falls on Splyce, and this is why I look at this Elise pick and I get a little bit concerned, because I think that it forces Splyce into a situation where they have to find an early game lead. They're forced to get a lane ahead, which means that if they're unable to do it, then they don't have a huge number of options back into the game in the mid to late game. And while we're only 7.5, 8 minutes in, of course it doesn't mean things are completely over yet for Splyce, but we saw one gank from Xerxe in the bot lane where he wasn't able to find much. We saw another gank in the mid lane where again he wasn't able to find much. And right now, he doesn't really have the best lane setups in order to really try and snowball that early.
Oh, Zanzarah's actually snuck behind Xerxe here. Now, Xerxe will know the blast cone has been used, but he doesn't know Zanzarah's here. Zanzarah's going to jump in. He definitely knows now. The knockback with the cask, and now Xerxe's trying to run away to safety. Xerxe on his way in. Xerxe still has the flash. We'll just use the hop to safety.
So unfortunately there for Zanzarah, Alphari wasn't really in a position to assist. Nukeduck will take a lot of damage off the back of a pretty negative trade. And you can see that now, after Humanoid was able to go back to base and actually pick up an item, he's now much more favorable in the trades. Meanwhile, Origen's bot lane continuing to dominate in this 2 versus 2. And so far, Origen off to a pretty solid early game lead.
Yeah, they're about 600 gold ahead, and if you have a look at the where that sits on these players, there's about a 500 gold lead for the Tristana. Patrik already building up towards what appears to be a first item Infinity Edge, and if you can get to 2-3 items relatively early on in the game, that Trist can have a huge amount of impact. I keep expecting more to happen, Vedius. I think I'm too used to G2 Fnatic now.
Yeah.
By this point, there's usually 14 kills
it, right?
and we've had a Baron fall.
OG, one of the slowest teams in our leagues in terms of average game time. Splyce is the slowest, so expectations are that the game will go a little bit longer. But I want to talk about this Infernal and how important it is for Splyce to actually get their hands on it, because as a Drake, the Infernal gives you a lot of gold in terms of stats, right? Because of the percentage value, and obviously it gets more valuable the later the game goes on. But because of how narrow the win conditions are for Splyce in terms of gaining early advantages, they need to grab this Infernal Drake to give them more power, help them transition into mid-game better. And if they give it over to Origen, who already has the better scaling, then it just makes the game that much harder for you. So I think it's really important for Splyce to look for this, and we can see that Vizicsacsi is holding on to his TP, and I think this will be really important so that they can answer to any kind of plays that Origen tried to force towards the bot side of the map.
Very positive trade there for Nukeduck as he continues to force Humanoid underneath the tower. Those Mercury treads early on will help him with a lot of the damage coming out from the Sylas. And we'll see exactly how Origen decide to set up around this, because at the moment they have total control of the river. They have a pushing bot, they have a pushing mid.
So one of the big things was that Humanoid just went to go and grab his blue, which means that he loses push in the mid lane. Kobbe also reset with his teleport, so Splyce are just going to concede this Infernal Drake. And I think, as we mentioned, this is a very important Drake for them. Handing it over to Origen is really not what you want to do. So this is going to hurt them in the long run. For now, they're just going to have to accept that they're going to give that one up. And Origen sitting very pretty right now.
Yeah, 10 minutes in, they're about 1,000 gold in the lead. I do want to have just a slight talk about how now Splyce will look at the next few minutes of the game, because when we see things like the Elise, we talked about it, you want to see early ganks, you want to see them getting ahead. We talked about Splyce wanting to get early leads. If you're in this position where you haven't found those early leads, how do you then change your game plan? It's a tough question, I'm sorry.
Yeah, because as we mentioned in the draft, it's one of those situations where I don't think Splyce drafted themselves a lot of options. I think by going for the Braum in the bot lane, you naturally go for a much more defensive lane. When you go for the Sylas, like, this is a lane that you can look to play around, but again, because you're playing into a Nautilus who's pretty tanky and safe, you're limited in terms of your options, and that's why I thought maybe in the early laning phase, they could look to make a play around top side of the map, which is where they're hanging around right now. But Alphari's at a point where he's already picked up armor boots, and of course against Elise, that's not the strongest setup, but he's past the level 6 mark, he has his ultimate available. So I'm just looking at it, I feel like if I'm Xerxe in this situation, I don't have a lot of easy lanes to gank. And it's not easy for us to find an early game lead. And so Origen is just freely scaling, and they're going to get to a point where they kind of become uncontrollable. And I don't want to say already that Splyce is kind of waiting for Origen to make a mistake, but for Origen's perspective, they don't really need to fight or do anything. Which is why it's that much harder for Splyce, because they need to force Origen to take bad fights, force them to overcommit, force them into situations where they can find skirmishes so that they can get these early kills, get these early leads, and then if they have an advantage coming into the mid-game, then they can better utilize that gun.
It really feels like Origen's late flex in the draft is stymieing Splyce at every opportunity. Nukeduck with his champion Ocean once again showing that there is something under the sea that he can bring out in the form of the Nautilus. Origen chipping away at this tower in the bottom lane. Norskeren going in with the Glacial Fissure. TP's coming out from Splyce and from Origen. 2 TPs from Splyce. It's going to be a 4v3 for the moment. Nukeduck caught up. Counter teleport in by Origen. The charm comes out by Mithy onto the backline. Kobbe's jumped forward. He flashes away. He dodges away, but Alphari lands the counter strike. And now Kobbe's so low, he's sticking down. He will fall. Origen get their second kill of the game. Patrik and Alphari are going to be able to jump out, but Humanoid's going back in, trying to go for the trade. Stopwatch from Patrik will stop them in their tracks. And Origen find the kill and get out of dodge.
This was the best opportunity that Splyce had to try and find that early fight. If they could have won this, they could have gotten a foothold back into the game. Unfortunately, Kobbe dives in with his ultimate and puts him in a prime situation for Alphari to jump on top of him. And with that, Splyce lose a member, they're forced to disengage, and OG extend their gold lead. So here, we'll notice that Vizicsacsi TPs before returning to lane. This allows Alphari to push up that wave, and now he can just wait for a prime opportunity to TP in. The moment that commitment comes in from Nukeduck, he's realized, okay, I have to join the fight. Good ultimate on the backline from Mithy, which means that when Kobbe dives in, there's no follow-up because the support is keeping them at arm's length. That allows Alphari then to jump on top of them with the bomb from Patrik as well. That's more than enough damage, and a good stopwatch from Patrik allows his team to provide peel so that Humanoid can't find any quick kills. So well-played fight overall from Origen. And again, it comes to this situation where Splyce is kind of feeling the need to try and force something in the early game. They're forced to try and make a play happen, and unfortunately, they do not make it work. And
the difficulty for Splyce is that Origen are a relatively tanky team. You've got a Nautilus, Gragas, and a Xerxe on the top side. Although we see Humanoid pumping out over 2k damage that fight, you just can't quite get enough on one player to burst them out.
And you can see that with Nukeduck, his build looks like he's working towards the early Abyssal Mass. We're not seeing the Proto Belts or the high damage versions that we often saw from Nort mid. His whole goal is to be a frontline.
Yep.
He's saying, you know what, the Gragas is going to go AP, we have a Xerxe, we have a Tristana, we have plenty of damage on our team. I just need to follow up Mithy when he tries to force a fight, and I just need to be a frontline for my carries to play around. And so far, it's working out very nicely.
He is the bouncer for the team. VIP is Patrik and Alphari in his back pocket. Alphari's going to get the tower in the bottom lane as Splyce look for the Rift Herald. Origen are in the position to react to this. The dredge line comes out. Norskeren on the front line. It's a 3v4 for the moment. Kobbe coming in from the backside. The repel up by Humanoid. And here they go. Kobbe jumping in. Rift Herald goes down. Zanzarah's the one to secure it. Xerxe is going to get a kill onto the Gragas though, and the rest of Splyce are chasing in. Braum will fall. Nukeduck stunned up. He'll go down as well. Splyce get 2.
Now remember that OG did not have to go for this fight. They could have quite easily traded this objective for the bot tower, which they ended up securing, and because they'd used all their teleports, there was no way for Alphari to support them, so I feel like it was an overzealous fight from Origen. Splyce finally picked themselves up some kills. The bright side for Origen is that they deny the Rift Herald, which means that they can keep their towers alive for longer, they can look to stall the game out for longer, but again, trying to take these fights, the best thing for Origen to do is inaction. You know, try and
Mithy's
play
going to get there.
Oh, and he's still going to secure it anyway. All right, fair enough.
Well timed by Mithy.
All right, so like maybe it's not the end of the world for Origen, but again, it's one of those things where did they really need to take this risk? Was it necessarily worth it? And we can see here, they're in a 4 versus 3. They don't have vision on Vizicsacsi, and then they recognize, oh, we're actually in a 4 versus 5. And Zara does lock down the steal, but they're in an awkward situation where they can't really commit to the fight because they don't have the numbers, and there's no way for the Xerxe to be able to TP in. So Splyce quite comfortably use their numbers advantage to get a 2-for-1 trade.
And they stayed around on that Rift Herald for a long time, but not quite long enough as Mithy was able to jump in at the last moment to secure it. Tower did fall in the bottom lane. Alphari took that, and means that Origen have about 1,700 gold lead or so. Much better than their regular season, where they averaged about 300 gold behind at the 15-minute mark.
Just playing well around their lanes, utilizing pressure quite well. Finding a 2v2 kill bot definitely helps. And I'd like to see Origen now utilize this Rift Herald in the mid lane. Notice that Splyce are investing their vision up towards top side. This is forcing Alphari to play more defensive. And we do see the Rift Herald come down, but Splyce should actually be able to get back in time. So a little early in the usage.
We can call it bad, Vedius.
Yeah, all right, it was pretty bad.
Yeah.
Thank you, Patrik. Thank you for keeping me honest there.
Okay.
They definitely should have pushed the wave in first, or had no wave at all, and then they should have used the Rift Herald. Instead, they just kind of throw it away.
Yep. And that is a big chunk of gold that has just fallen out of the hands of Origen.
I mean, if you want to look at bright sides, it drew all the members of Splyce down towards mid, which meant that Alphari could stay top and just keep sieging. And they've now gotten a free time to secure this Drake.
I'm not sure the Rift Herald used to mid got them the Drake. I think Splyce just backing off got them the Drake.
No, but it was one of those situations where, so they saw the Rift Herald mid. Vizicsacsi came down to assist because he didn't have TP and he was afraid of a potential fight. And if he wasn't there, then it would have given OG priority because they have the Rift Herald, which then allowed Alphari to push out top, forcing Vizicsacsi to then go top. And because he's forced to go top to catch the wave,
can't fight.
OG then guarantee numbers advantage bot. So
it makes a lot of sense. I do want to just give a little bit of hope to Splyce fans. Out of all the teams that have had a deficit at 15 minutes during the regular season, they have a 39% win rate when they are behind. It's the highest of any team. So 4 out of 10 games or so, they go on to win.
So you're telling me they're better than Fnatic and G2 based on the regular season?
If they're behind at 15-minute marks.
Okay, coming back into the games.
Yeah, because I'm not saying they're better than Fnatic and G2.
But at that one specific thing.
At that one specific thing they are, and maybe a diving top lane tower. Xerxe with a great Gnar into the wall, and Mithy falls. Xerxe's so tanky. Alphari's going to be able to get away from this one. 1-for-1 trade in the top lane.
I'm sorry, I don't know why I find that so funny. I saw the Rakan dive underneath the tower, land the knock-up, and this Gnar literally just said, no, slams him into the wall. And 4 members were sent top, which means that Splyce are able to take away this tower. And it's, again, one of those situations where did Origen really need to force that play? Like, again, they outscale. They don't really need to make much happen on the map. They're making this play because they want to rather than because that they need to.
Does give Alphari some time with the tower alone, so he'll take that down. Splyce yet to break one of these towers. They will get bot in just a second, so it's 2-for-1 on the turret score. Still that 2,000 gold lead. Origen with 2 dragons in their back pocket, and it's all lining up 2-2-2-2 across the board. Patrik has now finished his second item on this Tristana, only getting stronger and stronger as the game goes on. Yet to see second item from Kobbe. It looks like he's going for Iginsu's Rage Blade on that Kaisa.
nothing to stand out as of yet. We can see the Trinity Force now available on Alphari. I imagine that he's going to feel very comfortable and strong in terms of the 1v1 up against Xerxe. But you can see that he's actually moving back towards the bot side of the map. His teleport is up, Nukeduck is up, Patrik is just about to come up. Everyone's TPs, everyone's flashes, they are now all recovering from the last fight that we did see from both these teams.
You promising me another fight, Betty?
I mean, I wish. But, unfortunately, based on experience, neither of these teams are exceptionally strong at forcing fights or playing around objectives come the mid-game. But we'll have to wait and see again. It's been a while. I do quite like what Origen has been doing. I think that there have been a couple opportunities where they've tried to force fights that they didn't necessarily need to. But outside from that, I think their play has been pretty clean.
Yeah.
And again, remember that in terms of the comp, they know they're going to outscale. They know they're in a position where they should be stronger later into the game. So as long as they maintain a gold advantage from this point moving forward, then they know they're going to be much stronger and gain more value from when they pick up these items compared to what Splyce is.
I think the big thing for me with Origen now is how well do they set up around neutral objectives with a jungler that hasn't been practicing with them, that hasn't been playing with them, that has just come into the team basically today after playing at the EU Masters yesterday. He didn't have the best of performances for Origen Barcelona yesterday, losing to Rogue eSports Club. So I really want to see how good that sort of macro in the late game is for them.
Well, what I'm really interested in is how much more tempered does Zanzarah become.
Yes, because he's an aggressive
He's a jungler that really loves to just force engages. The reason why we mentioned his Sejuani during the draft was because his Sejuani was something that came out a lot during both Spanish finals that he was involved in with Origen, and he would just throw out that ultimate. Whenever he saw an opportunity, it was going out. And it's something that Splyce always has to respect. And that's why I was quite excited to see him join this roster, because I think that he can act as that go button, that trigger that can encourage and enable Origen, where sometimes it felt like it was lacking during the regular season. But so far it hasn't been required. They've just been tempered. They maintain a pretty healthy 2k gold lead over their opposition. And now we start to see more items coming through as well. You can see the Abyssal Mask now finished for Nukeduck. He's now going to be even tankier, a very strong front line, especially against a lot of the AP damage that is coming out from the side of Splyce. And it looks like he is working towards a little bit of armor as well.
I think the greatest example of his aggression is a clip. If you're on Twitter, you've probably seen before. He's playing Trundle jungle, does his red at level 1.
Showed it in Reddit.
Did we show him Reddit check? Does his jungle level 1 and then just flashes over the Dragon Pit wall to try and invade the enemy blue. I mean, you avoid vision.
Yes,
you avoid all of the wards. So next level mind games. Origen now trying to get some vision control of this top side. Teleport coming in by Patrik as he joins the fight, and Splyce don't have too much awareness. They know that they're not on the Baron at the moment, as they have a ward in there, and there's no control ward coming out from Origen, but it doesn't seem like Origen really want the Baron. They're just looking for chip damage on this top lane tower.
I like what Origen did there. That TP top would have been really dangerous for Patrik, but because Zanzarah and Nukeduck were moving through mid into the top side jungle, they could actually assure that he was safe to siege onto this tower. So they take half the health, now they could be looking at a fight.
Zanzarah just used his ultimate. Dredge line coming in by Nukeduck. He's stunned up. Norskeren down to half HP. The depth charge comes out, hits onto Kobbe on the backline. Nukeduck, the charm's coming out. Nukeduck flashes away, but Kobbe's on the chase. He'll get him. And now this fight on the top side of the fight keeps going on. Chachi flashes away, but Humanoid gets into the middle of them all with the Kingslayer. He heals up, and it's a double for Kobbe. He's looking for more. Alphari jumps in with a leap strike, but the rest of Splyce are on the chase. Origen having to back away. Patrik down to about half HP. Splyce will not be able to go any further.
And this is a team fight that Splyce come out on top of. Origen not reached that point yet where they feel comfortable enough forcing these 5 versus 5s, and Splyce are able to punish them for it. As we look at how this fight gets set up, you can see the Origen trying to maintain priority over the top side, but look at the positioning of Norskeren. He's soaking up all the damage. Kobbe is safe. Vizicsacsi is stacking up that Mega Gnar, and while he does get ulted out, what he also does is he keeps the Jax busy, which means that Kobbe can freely dive onto Nukeduck with the front line gone. You can see how much health regeneration is coming out from the Sylas and how much time he's buying for his team. And then if it weren't for Alphari zoning Kobbe away in that situation, Splyce could have actually looked to chase more, but it was one of those fights where Origen focused the wrong target. They shouldn't have been trying to set that play up, and they end up getting aptly punished.
I think a really big thing about it was, as well, just before the fight started, Zanzarah used his ult to clear a wave underneath the top lane tower. So they didn't have the disengage tool, and Splyce were like, well, we can go straight away. We know that cask isn't available for them. Now Splyce are the ones with the control of the river, and you can see how much that has set back Origen. They'll go for the Ocean Dragon. It will be their 3rd of the game. Does give them another win condition as the game develops, looking for that multiple stack on the Elder Dragon, but Splyce will look up towards the Baron, and they will start it up.
TP is available on Nukeduck. A lot of the vision will now be cleared out. Origen should be able to get back in time. Look at how slowly this Baron's going down.
Not a huge amount of damage from Splyce as of yet. Mithy on the front line can just dodge away. The Winter's Bite will connect, and no teleport burnt by Nukeduck means he still has that up if Splyce try and make the same play.
Origen for now, they don't want to try and force the fight. They need to just wait for more items to finish coming through. You can see with the Spear of Sojin done on Alphari and him being level 14, he's pretty strong, but they want the third item done for Patrik. They'd ideally like another tank item completed on Nukeduck so that he can be a little bit beefier of a front line, and then they could be in a better position to look to fight. But right now, I'm a little worried about this. Humanoid, rather. Humanoid with the Sylas already completing 2 items, and Kobbe with a fully stacked Manamune is definitely, Muramana rather, is very, very strong.
Well, it's a fully stacked Manamune, which becomes a Muramana.
Yes.
This is why we're the dream team, Ben.
Yeah. We cover each other's bases.
Yeah.
Question is, can you juggle?
No, why? You think of competitive juggling?
That was fun. So I actually spent like a really long time learning to juggle, and I became really good at it. But I can only do it with like the soft like.
But that's fine, right? Because I will throw you the balls, and then you juggle them, and that's the duo.
No, because if we're training me to be good at juggling the sports.
Chainsaws, yeah.
You have to tackle me, and I must avoid you.
I will happily tackle you, Vedius. That has been a dream of mine for a very long time. You used to play rugby. You have to remember that.
Yeah, I used to play rugby. I used to be on the wing. Yeah. I was very good at running away.
The wingers were the people that we said like to keep their hair good while playing rugby, which I think is what happens here. Xerxe jumping in with the blast cone, and Mithy and Patrik are waiting for them. A little bit of an LEC podcast there for a second, but Xerxe will get caught out as he just stepped into an area of no vision.
He failed the jump. He doesn't have his flash. He gets punished. Bit of a Vizicsacsi classic, taking a path that often ends up resulting in his demise. Origen now using their numbers advantage to reclaim some control over the mid and bot. They're going to have that wave pushing out. No teleport available on Alphari, but he is sitting at level 15 right now. Very, very strong. But the same can be said for Humanoid. You'll notice that he has a 60 CS advantage over his lane counterpart in Nukeduck. He has 9.7k gold now, and he is definitely very, very strong.
He definitely is. We do see the Blade of the Ruin King here, second item on Xerxe. He's gone towards that. He's just trying to get as much damage in these fights as possible. Origen pushing in the mid lane will almost take down the turret. Meanwhile, in the bottom lane, Alphari gets 1 for himself. Patrik gets the tower in the end, and that's 2 more in the back pockets of Origen. Still only about 2,000 gold lead. Splyce have been able to keep that one pretty close, but in terms of scaling, Origen will be very happy with the current state of affairs.
Yep. It's one of those, it's always a weird situation when you talk about scaling, right? Because as we see, Mithy needs to be careful. When people look at this, they go Kaisa, Tristana, both of them obviously scale very well, right? And Sylas is naturally going to scale very well into the late game as well. One of the biggest difference maker is how much more value Gragas offers. Ooh, fight kicking off.
Hook landing onto Humanoid, knocked up, airborne, he goes golden, but there's no escape from the rest of Origen. Shut down. Origen find the pick they want, and it was Humanoid who overstepped.
So, very little to do with scaling there, just a big misstep, as you rightly said. Vizicsacsi was catching the bot wave that Alphari had already set up. Good hook lands from the side of Nukeduck. Humanoid does use his stopwatch, but it is not enough. Now, Origen, they decide not to commit to the Baron. They're just going to use this time to clear out the vision, reset, restock on their wards, and then they can look to move back towards the objective and then set up for it a little bit later.
With their lane assignments at the moment, I think they'll be looking to get vision around it and try and force something out from Splyce here.
I actually think Inferno will be the next focus, which actually makes a little more sense because it's a safer objective to set up for, and a second Infernal is a lot of bonus gold and stat value at this point in the game as well. So I think that investing towards that objective makes a little bit more sense at this point in the game, and there's no need to gamble the Baron right now.
Splyce seem to have the same read as Xerxe and Xerxe are just around here. Zanzarah has had a pretty decent performance, a solid performance so far on the Gragas this game, and as the game continues, he just really has that disengage role in team fights. Maybe a bit of engage as well if you can find it, but Mithy's been the one to go in most of the time. Patrik jumping forward here, Mithy with the charm, doesn't land onto Norskeren. A beautiful Glacial Fissure will stop him in his tracks, but Xerxe's down towards the bottom side, and once again he's been caught out. Alphari on the chase. The depth charge connects, but Alphari can't quite get there. He was slowed up with the boomerang. There's the Blade of the Ruin King, but it's not enough. Alphari, in the end, will take the kill off of Xerxe, and now Origen 5 members strong. Gonna push up towards this mid lane. It's currently a 4v4 because Alphari isn't here. Splyce might look for the turn. They know there's no charm on Mithy.
He has TP, so he could look to come in from behind.
Flank position for Alphari. 4v5 in favor of Origen. Mithy on the front line. Norskeren, Xerxe, Kobbe, Humanoid have to do something huge here. The depth charge is going to come out. Mithy caught out, but it dived onto the back line. Patrik almost down. Kobbe takes him out, and now it's a 4v4. Xerxe's gone up. Mithy goes down. Another kill comes out. Alphari on the chase. Nukeduck's going to get a stun off, and it's Alphari on Nukeduck catching out Kobbe, assassinating him. Zanzarah will kill Norskeren, and Origen win it in the fight.
Great ultimate from Humanoid to set up for a play onto Patrik, but it was not enough the moment Alphari joined the fight. There was no peel. Jax could easily dive onto the two carries, and with the assistance of the crowd control setup from Nukeduck, it was so easy for Alphari to run Splyce down. Big teamfight win for Origen. They're going to secure the second Inferno.
And in this Alienware replay, keep your eyes on the AD carries, because you'll see both Patrik and Kobbe get just assassinated.
But I want to draw your attention first to Humanoid, because notice how he uses the ultimate onto Patrik, forcing him to ult away from the rest of his team. This means that he has no peel, because the dive comes in from both Kobbe and Humanoid. The two is not enough. It's too much for Nukeduck to be able to deal with, but then Alphari joins the fray. He dives on top of the Sylas. He can then join up with Nukeduck to help secure those kills, and it was smart from Splyce to engage when they did, but of course they couldn't expect or account for the fact that Alphari was able to come in from behind without Vizicsacsi there to assist the team.
And it's one of the reasons this Nautilus pick works out so well for Origen. It gives you another CC tool to lock down Kobbe if he gets into fights, to lock down Humanoid if he gets into fights. Yes, he's not dealing that much damage himself, but when you have two incredibly strong scalers in the form of Tristana and Jax, doesn't really matter that Nukeduck isn't the one topping the DPS charts.
Yeah, I agree.
I'm basically just saying what you said a while ago.
Yeah, that's why I said I agree. Great point, Medic. Really smart.
Thank you, Vedius.
We'll notice now, if we have a quick look at the side wave setup, you can notice that there's a bit of a slow push going on towards the bot side of the map, so this will slowly push this way. This has just been pushed out, but basically what this means is the Origen maintain an element of pressure on the side waves for now, but those waves will stack up and catch up. So in this period of time, Vizicsacsi and Splyce will have an opportunity to actually move into the enemy jungle, because Origen will be forced to try and catch these waves.
We'll see if they go for it. Xerxe going in with the Blade of the Ruin King, getting the slow onto Zanzarah. Mithy's going to dodge away. And Plasma's going to start connecting onto Nukeduck here. He's stunned up, but he can use the dredge line. You can buffer that one, so he gets away from the concussive blows. And now Splyce turn their eyes towards the Baron. 5 members strong. It looks like bot lane pushing in for the time being.
So this is something that Ender and I looked a lot into. Once you reach 25 minutes into the game, cannon minions start spawning every wave. So if you just leave these waves, they actually just stay there for the most part. It will eventually push one way.
It's a super duper slow push.
Yeah, but it effectively just stays there, which is actually why it's really important for someone to go clear it out, because otherwise the farm just ends up bleeding. And that's why there's not a huge amount of pressure on Splyce right now, and why they can maintain this control. But fortunately for Origen, Alphari is now pushing up towards the top side, and this will create a wave that Splyce have to go and deal with. This then gives Origen the opportunity to move into the river, but they actually don't care about the top wave, and now they're staying clumped as 5. So this is a lot of farm that is just being bled away from Splyce.
Some strong vision control here from Origen as they keep control of the pit. Alphari will get rid of that control ward that Splyce had, and this ward behind the pit as well was spotting out Humanoid as he went for a rotation up towards the top lane. Now with priority, Origen will go in, get some more vision into the Splyce jungle. And still that gold is only sitting about 2,500, but Alphari is at 3 items with a QSS to top that off, so it makes it a lot harder to kill him in these fights, and it means Splyce will have to be on disengaged duty to keep that Jax off their back line.
We're quite comfortably at the point where Origen have outscaled in a team fight, right? And so, in theory, it should be easier for Origen to win in these team fights. They have stronger champions at this point in the game, but a lot of it comes down to execution as well, and it only takes one bad fight to swing the game. Now we see Alphari.
Gets the counter-strike off, but here comes Kobbe straight onto him, and maybe the execution is Alphari going down. Now Origen on the chase. Mithy has the charm. The knockback onto Norskeren. Alphari able to dodge out off the back of it, dodging out all those shots. Norskeren on the front line has been killed by Patrik, and the rest of Origen are here for the party. Splyce will just back away to the top side of their jungle, but Origen are the ones to get the kill.
Now that did cost Alphari his GA, but he's absolutely fine with that because he knows that it was going to buy enough time for the rest of his team to follow up, and Splyce were not comfortable going for the re-engage. Notice how Origen now have full control over the river. They'll just quickly clear that out. Splyce don't really know what's going on, but Origen, as per as we
Words are hard
expect
today.
from the way of Origen, they will look to play it safe. Never mind, they're going for the Baron. Ooh, I like this from Origen. Let's go.
Yeah, double TPs coming in, but Splyce are still around. Xerxe has the Gnar, has the flash. Xerxe has a flash of his own. There's no blast cone for him to go in, but he can repel up the Baron. Down to 7,000 HP. Xerxe will jump away from the leap strike from Alphari, and now Origen go back towards it. They keep it aggroed. Humanoid on that front line has the depth charge. Stolen that one away from Nukeduck. The cocoon doesn't quite connect. Humanoid straight into the dredge line. Alphari coming in with the counter strike, but Zanzarah's taking a bit of chip damage from the Baron that's now reset, and Splyce are able to distract Origen.
But look at the side waves once again. This wave is pushing in towards the bot side of the map. A lot of farm and gold is being bled away from Splyce, and Origen are fine just wasting this time.
Big thing though, Origen burnt both their teleports for that play. Splyce still have all three of theirs, so they can go up towards that side lane and then teleport into the fight if they need. It's not the best of shapes, but it's better than losing a Baron.
Yeah, and I do feel like Origen had the potential to commit to the Baron there. They were doing a lot of damage to it, but instead they decided to not take the gamble of the potential steal. They've now spotted out Vizicsacsi.
Xerxe still has the Gnar, has the flash. Zanzarah looking for that body slam. The flash already used. Oh, the explosive cast was dodged away from. And Nukeduck still on the chase. Teleport coming in here by Splyce. The Gnar into the wall. Zanzarah's the one to be caught out. Counter strike from Alphari gets the double stun. Xerxe down into mini Gnar. And here comes the damage, the charm on the backline. Origen have found their fight. They're just going to demolish Splyce here. There's nothing Splyce can do about it at all. It's a double kill for both Patrik and for Alphari, and it felt like the writing had been on the wall for a while. Origen should at least be able to break open the base here, if not take the win.
Clean ace and easy fight from the side of Origen. You talked about the double TP, but all Splyce did was TP into their demise. This should be an opportunity for Origen to end the game and take game one of this best of 5.
Great stuff by Origen. They're going to push in this top wave, go through those Nexus towers, and they will be 1-0 up in this series. It was a slower game as expected from both these two teams, but it's Origen who strike first, and they are 1-0 up in the regional gauntlet.
So I do feel like when it comes to the draft, Origen really just set themselves up for success. They had the stronger late game. They played the early game better than Splyce did, which means that they were never really at a deficit. And Splyce were really limited in their options. There were a couple of opportunities for Splyce to come back in when Origen tried to force a fight, a few fights that they just didn't need to force. But in the end of the day, none of those fights were severe enough that it gave Splyce a foothold into the game. They never lost the Baron, they never really needed to use the Baron, and it all came down to one big fight towards the top side of the map, where Origen was just so much stronger that Splyce could do very little about it. Definitely did not help that when Kobbe TP'd, he immediately got knocked up by the ultimate from Nukeduck, which then allowed Origen to just melt through the opposition. So honestly, well played from Origen. I like the draft, I like what they did, and we now need to see some adaptations from Splyce, because I think that you either... I guess I'm of the opinion that if you're going to go with something like an Elise, then you need to commit to the early game, and you need to have an easy lane that you can actually play around with the Elise. And when you have Gnar into the Jax, when you have Sylas into Nautilus, when you pick a Braum in the bot, you just don't have easy lanes that you can find those early game advantages. And it wasn't like Xerxe did nothing, right? We saw him gank bot, mid, and top, and none of them worked out. He just couldn't really set anything up, so... changes from Splyce is what I need to see.
Totally agree with you there, Vedius. We're going to hear more from our analyst desk right now.
Thank you very much. What I'd like to know is why are the bananas on the floor? But we'll get to that later, as said and announced by Medic. We're here with Ender, with Yamato, and with Gilius, ex-teammates, of course, before some unfortunate events unfolded. Just kidding. I know there's no bad blood between.
Wait, I thought Vitality did well last year.
Ender just made it awkward.
If you want to go that route, we can go it.
Instead, we're gonna channel all of our energy into talking about the first game in this best of 5, starting with the picks and the bans. Quite interesting. We have heard rumors, or we know that the Nautilus is a good pick in the bot lane, and we've known it for a while. Yet here it comes out in the draft quite early, Yamato, and OG did throw a bit of a wrench in the plans of Splyce.
So it's crazy because you have to assume almost instantly that Nautilus is going to go into bottom, but this is, I think Doinby played it first, and Nautilus mid. Basically, it's a pick that you put on mid lane and you expect your support and jungle to come because you're going to lose much of the 1v1s that you play. For example, against Sylas, he's supposed to lose 1v1, but this time around, we didn't see much action at all in the early game, so Nautilus didn't get to show his true potential. And on top of that, what they gained out of picking the Nautilus is that they managed to flex. We had a classic Norskeren Braum, and then the Rakan came in and cut them in half in the bot lane.
Yeah, I mean, as Yamato said, the team comp of OG is definitely superior, lane-wise, and 5v5 wise. That's how I feel. But Splyce definitely has options in the early game. They have Braum for a level 1 invade or just getting vision early to track the enemy jungler. They have an Elise, which is really good into Gragas in the early game. But Xerxe decided to just, take it easy. Game 1, just relax a bit in the jungle, farm it up, and lose in the end. So I want Xerxe to play the game next game.
Okay.
Yeah, and especially like if you're not influencing the game early on, as you said, the side of Origen is going to outscale in the 5v5, but also the split push, right? We have Jax into that Gnar matchup. Once you finish off that Spear of Shojin on the Jax, like there's not much you can do as Gnar. You can try to clear the waves or send Sylas to, have the wave clear, but eventually that is just going to be a win condition in itself.
Okay, and then Zanzarah, what do we make of him going for the Gragas? Nothing too crazy, and also something that OG knows how to play around, so nothing special in the first game.
I think it's a perfect game for him. As Gilius pointed out, Xerxe was not really active this game. I think he had some options to gank in the bot lane, and it didn't happen. He could potentially also gank the Nautilus because Nautilus has to walk on the wave. He's very bulky as a champion. He doesn't have boots early on. He bought the Catalyst first. I think there's room to punish, but Xerxe was completely inactive, and you know that Gragas is going to outscale him, so Zanzarah has a big smile on his face.
Yeah, and I was also really impressed by Zanzarah. It's like a rookie jungler coming in, playing Gauntlet, the Gauntlet against Splyce, a very experienced team. And he's doing pretty well, honestly. He was doing some creative paths sometimes. One time where he went over the top wall with the plant. It was really cheeky. And yeah, I think Zanzarah will pull out some cheesy picks in the next games, and I'm looking forward to it.
We're hyped. Well, he did win his first game in the LEC, and there were some spicy fights, namely bot lane. It took a while, but this was a very important one to steer us in the direction of an OG advantage.
Well, the weird thing about this fight is like Norskeren botches the engage entirely. And here's where Origen don't actually have to handshake and take this fight. They would have had a double teleport advantage, but instead they decide to bring everyone down here. Even though Mithy starts it off with a good engage, the follow-up isn't quite there, so Origen only walk away with the 1 kill, the cask only getting the 1 knockback as well. So this could have been more for Origen, but I actually feel like they should have just not even gone for it at all. They could have just had the TP advantage.
For sure. I think something that surprised them with Splyce is that everyone always criticizes them for not doing anything early. And I feel like this almost causes a frustration for them to pull the trigger in a very, very bad and crazy way because of this criticism. It's as if this has been gnawing at the back of their head their entire season and last season as well. And now we come into this situation where they're like, guys, we're not doing anything. We have to do something. And he's like, guys, I am Braum, I have Flash, let's go in. And it was a disaster. It was the shittiest engage I've seen all day. all day. You know?
And then you got Gilius flaming your jungler after the game, of all people, saying you didn't do anything in the early game. I can understand why they're frustrated. But in all seriousness, it was, I think, not the most clean game from both sides, which we can forgive them for when it comes to the first game. And I do want to highlight the Rift Herald replay specifically, because Ender, you said this is a pattern I've noticed in OG. They always take bad fights around neutral objectives.
Well, Origen do this all the time. Throughout the summer split, it was often around the Drakes that just absolutely didn't matter. But here, Alphari is split pushing bottom lane without teleport, because just a few minutes after that play in the bottom lane, so they start this off. Yes, Zanzarah comes in and steals away the Rift Herald, but then the rest of the team commits. So like, let's just send everyone on in there. It was just a huge blunder here with OG dropping 2 members in the process.
I agree. I think OG really didn't need to do this. Like, Jax had no TP and was just pushing 3 waves in, but if OG just gives this up and stalls some time, like stopping the enemy recalls as example.
At least they got it in the end.
Yeah, like Jax will lose like 3 Gnar will lose like 3 waves bot, and yeah, just really unnecessary to contest this.
Quite a lot of unnecessary moves, I would say, from both sides. And coming into the mid game, there was nothing overboard yet for Splyce, but Origen definitely had an advantage. How do you think the mid game progressed from there, and what did Origen do well and Splyce do not as well?
I think we had a pretty general stalemate. I think always first game jitters. I felt like everyone's kind of knocking off the dust of their shoulders coming into the game. I think they could have been a lot faster. And when I try to think of the mid and late game, I remember the main criticism I had in my mind was that Splyce wasn't really pushing out bottom wave or top wave. They had TPs that they could utilize. Kaisa is something that can be very, very dangerous, and that's what speaks to me when I think of the mid and late game with this one.
Well, Chachi did find himself in some dicey positions as well.
Oh, there's a funny statistic that I have been just dying to bring up ever since the segment started, because Vizicsacsi has the highest amount of isolated deaths in the history of like anyone's career over here in Europe, and that's 351. That is absolutely nuts.
And it's not that we're just calling it up just to kind of make fun of it, but it is that in these important games, it does give away a lot when you know that a Baron is on the line or another important objective in these games.
I think he pulls a lot of weight of the team with his split push pressure. Like, I think he's one of the few players in this team, no offense, but he knows how to play the map in the mid game. They usually go to the late game where Kobbe carries. In the mid game, Xerxe tries to play side lanes, but he gets caught a lot. His team must be able to get something on the other side of the map.
And on top of it, this is where everything ends, right? They catch him, and in the end, OG wins the game off this. So then...
Yeah. I mean, I really like Xerxe. I played with him in the team. It's really...
It's some bias, huh?
Yeah, I really like Xerxe, but...
Well, it doesn't mean you can't criticize when it happens.
Yeah, this was not good.
Yeah, the layering CC there from Mithy to Zanzarah just actually didn't give Splyce much of a chance. And even in that engage, like, I do feel like Vizicsacsi could have gotten out. Like, he jukes out the Gragas barrel, I believe, in order to not get caught out by that. But it is the thing where he's often trying to find flanks on the enemy team, trying to get behind them. He's spotted on a ward, and that's where he gets slammed down, which we're primarily criticizing.
Indeed.
Something that I can admit is that I remember when I played the best of 5 against him, he split pushed us to death completely. I feel like this is something that has gotten progressively worse. I think at the time where he was playing with you, when was it? Which year? A long time ago.
I think you're talking about the Unicorns, Xerxe with Diamond Procs.
This was...
and even after, he would split push you to death, as you say, just all the way up to
he
your
killed
nexus.
us. He killed us. Our game 5, he completely killed us. Steve, we were shouting his name, but it just wasn't enough. We're channeling his Maokai, but it didn't work. But I feel like it's gotten progressively worse. In this game, I think he got maybe caught 3 times, and it was not that great.
Wasn't great. On the other side, a great start for Origen and Zanzarah. Even though it wasn't perfect, they made it work. Yamato, we do have to move on, but I'd love to hear from you. Since Splyce is now on the back foot, what is the one change you want to see him make in game 2?
I feel like they need to play to their strengths. This game, I feel like they picked a lot of comfort. We had the Elise, but the comp didn't really tie anything together. What is the goal? I want to see something that is rolled around Kobbe. I want him to play for Kobbe, make him snowball, because he was the only shining light this game.
All right,
Small
let's see
point.
what happens. Go ahead.
Xerxe tried to actually do something in the early game. It will work for you.
There we go. We don't know if he's watching this segment. I mean, if I was him, I'd get really tilted, but we'll see. Origen, they did kick off the regional qualifiers with a win, but they still have a long way to go. We will be back for game 2 after this.